Do-hyun Park stood in front of 200 alien faces and smiled. It was the same smile he had worn for 15 years, polite, friendly, harmless. The smile hurt his face now, but he kept it there anyway. The council chamber was massive. It floated in space above a planet called Chiral Prime. Through the transparent walls, stars glittered like frozen tears. Each alien delegate sat in their special seat, designed for their particular body. Some had 6 legs. Some had wings. Some looked like walking crystals or floating gas clouds. Do-hyun was 53 years old. His hair was turning silver. His body ached from years of standing at attention during long council meetings. He had learned 37 alien languages. He had memorized countless rules about who to bow to and who to look in the eye. He had eaten food that made him sick and attended ceremonies that bored him to tears. All of this he had done with a smile. Today he was giving another speech about peace and cooperation. The aliens were not listening. The Vrex delegates whispered to each other. They looked like giant insects with see-through wings. The Calthoran representatives were huge lizard creatures covered in thick scales. One of them was actually sleeping, its chest rising and falling with deep breaths. Do-hyun finished his speech and bowed. A few aliens made polite clicking sounds. Most simply turned away. He walked out of the chamber with his head high and his smile fixed in place. The human embassy was a small building connected to the council station. The moment the door closed behind him, Do-hyun let the smile drop. His face felt like it might crack. He walked to his office and sat down heavily in his chair. 3 people were waiting for him. They had news, and none of it was good. Captain Minji Kang stood by the window. She was 42 years old with short black hair and sharp eyes that never missed anything. She commanded the human defense fleet stationed at the edge of council space. She wore her military uniform with pride, and she had never learned to smile the way Do-hyun did. Dr. Yoon Ji-han sat quietly in the corner. She was 38, small and quiet, with long black hair tied back. She preferred her research laboratory to political meetings. She studied alien biology and kept careful records of every species in the council. Agent Taewon Shin leaned against the wall near the door. Nobody was quite sure how old he was. He wore simple gray clothes and had the kind of face that people forgot easily. This was useful in his line of work. Taewon ran Earth's spy network across council space. Minji spoke first. Her voice was flat and hard. She reported that Vrex warships had been seen near human colonies. They called it training exercises, but their weapons were armed and ready. 3 times in the past month they had come within firing range of civilian stations. Yoonji added her information quietly. 3 human research stations had stopped responding. They were small stations, only 20 or 30 people each, but they had all gone silent within days of each other. The council said it was probably equipment failure. Yoonji did not believe in that many coincidences. Taewon pushed away from the wall and dropped a datapad on Do-hyun's desk. The information on it was worse than the other 2 reports combined. His spies had discovered a secret alliance. 23 council species had formed a coalition with one single goal. They wanted humanity removed from the galaxy. The reason was simple. Humanity had advanced too fast. Most alien species took thousands of years to develop space travel. Humans did it in a few hundred years. Other species needed generations to master jump drive technology. Humans learned it in decades, and humans reproduced faster than almost any other intelligent species. Human colonies spread across their territory like wildfire. The council was afraid. They looked at humanity and saw a threat. They saw a species that might one day challenge their power, so they had decided to act while humans were still weak enough to stop. Do-hyun read through the datapad slowly. His hands were shaking slightly. When he finished, he looked up at his 3 companions. Minji broke the silence. She asked the question they were all thinking. How much longer could they keep pretending? How much longer could they smile and bow while the council plotted their destruction? Do-hyun had no answer. He had spent 15 years believing that politeness would eventually earn respect. He had thought that if humans proved themselves peaceful and cooperative, the other species would accept them as equals. He had been wrong. Yoonji spoke up in her soft voice. She said something that surprised everyone. She noted that humans were good at pretending. Humans had evolved as hunters on Earth. They tracked prey for days, sometimes weeks, wearing the animal down until it could not run anymore. Patience was not weakness. It was strategy. The aliens thought humans were harmless because they smiled and negotiated. They did not understand that humans could be patient and dangerous at the same time. Taewon added his own observation. For 15 years, humans had been watching and learning. They had studied every council species. They knew their military capabilities, their political structures, their biological weaknesses. The aliens thought humans were gathering information out of curiosity. They were wrong. Minji walked over to the desk and looked Do-hyun in the eye. Her fleet was ready. Earth's military had been preparing for this moment since the day humanity joined the council. They had built ships in secret. They had trained soldiers. They had developed weapons designed specifically to fight alien technology. They had been polite, but they had never been helpless. Do-hyun looked at each of them in turn. These were not just his colleagues. They were his friends. They had stood beside him through 15 years of insults and humiliation. They had believed in his vision of peaceful coexistence even as the evidence piled up that the council would never accept them. Now he had to make a choice. He could continue playing the diplomatic game, hoping against hope that things would change. Or he could accept what Minji had been telling him for years. The council would never see humans as equals. They would only see them as a threat to be eliminated. He stood up from his desk and walked to the window. Outside, the council station glittered in the starlight. It looked beautiful and peaceful. It was neither. Do-hyun thought about all the speeches he had given, all the compromises he had made, all the times he had swallowed his pride and smiled when he wanted to scream. He thought about the human colonists on those research stations that had gone silent. He thought about the 6 million people living on Haven Station, unaware that Vrex warships were circling like sharks. He turned back to face the others. His voice was quiet but firm. He told them to prepare a secure transmission to Earth Command. Use the highest level of encryption. He would send the message himself. Taewon asked what message he wanted to send. Do-hyun looked at him and said 5 words that would change the galaxy forever. The mask has served its purpose. The others understood immediately. For 15 years, humanity had worn a mask of politeness and cooperation. They had pretended to be harmless. They had let the council believe they were weak. Now it was time to let that mask fall away and show the galaxy what humanity really was. Minji smiled for the first time in months. It was not a diplomatic smile. It was the smile of a soldier who had been waiting a very long time for permission to fight back. Yoonji nodded and began pulling up data on her portable computer. She had files on every council species, biological information, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, information that had been collected quietly over 15 years. Taewon was already moving toward the communications room. He would encrypt the message and send it through channels that the council could never trace. Do-hyun sat back down at his desk. His hands were no longer shaking. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe properly. The weight of pretending had been crushing him slowly. Now that weight was gone. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder marked with Earth symbol. Inside were plans that had been developed over years of careful preparation. Contingency plans for the day when diplomacy failed. Plans for survival. Plans for war. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. They were capable of great patience and great politeness. They could smile and bow and follow the rules. But underneath that civilized surface lived something that had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain, through determination, intelligence, and an absolute refusal to give up. The council had made a fatal mistake. They had mistaken the mask for the face underneath. They had confused courtesy with weakness. They had assumed that because humans chose peace, they were incapable of war. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The emergency alert reached Do-hyun at 3 a.m, station time. He was already awake. He had not been sleeping well for weeks. When his communicator buzzed, he knew immediately that something terrible had happened. Haven Station was gone. 6 million people had lived on Haven Station. It was one of humanity's largest colonies. A beautiful world with blue oceans and green forests. Families had built homes there. Children had been born there. People had dreamed of spending their entire lives on that peaceful planet. Now it was destroyed. An asteroid had struck the planet. The impact was so powerful that it cracked the crust and sent massive waves across the oceans. The atmosphere caught fire. Within hours, everything on the surface was dead. The official report called it a tragic accident. A rogue asteroid from the outer system had somehow bypassed all the defense satellites and struck the planet. These things happen sometimes in space. The universe was dangerous. Taewon presented different information to Do-hyun. His spies had intercepted communications before the impact. The asteroid had guidance systems. It was not natural. Someone had aimed it like a weapon. The technology was Vrex in design. The launch codes matched Kalthoran military protocols. This was not an accident. It was murder. It was also a test. The Council wanted to see how humanity would respond. Would they fight back? Would they accept the loss and stay quiet? Would they prove that they were as harmless as they pretended to be? Do-hyun gathered the evidence. He prepared a presentation with images, data, and communication intercepts. He requested an emergency session of the Council. He was going to show them the proof and demand justice. Minji warned him not to expect anything. The Council would not care about evidence. They would protect their own. But Do-hyun had to try. He still believed somewhere deep inside that truth and justice mattered. The emergency session was held the next day. Do-hyun stood in front of the assembled delegates. He did not smile this time. His face was hard and his voice was cold. He showed them everything. The guidance systems, the launch codes, the timeline that proved this was a planned attack. The Vrex ambassador made clicking sounds that translated to laughter. He suggested that human colonists should not settle in dangerous asteroid fields. Perhaps humans were not experienced enough for space colonization. Perhaps they should stay closer to their home world where it was safer. The Kalthoran representative did not even pretend to care. He yawned, showing rows of sharp teeth. His massive body shifted in his seat like he was bored. Other delegates looked away. Some made sympathetic noises but offered no support. They all knew what had happened. They simply did not care. The council chairwoman was a being named Velthara. She looked like a living crystal, her body reflecting light in rainbow patterns. She had been in power for 300 years. She spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Velthara declared that the matter required further investigation. The council would form a committee to study the evidence. This would take time, perhaps years. In the meantime, they should all move on to the next item on the agenda. Do-hyun stood there in silence. 6 million human beings were dead. The evidence of murder was clear, and the council was going to do nothing. He walked out of the chamber without bowing. Without asking permission to leave, he simply turned his back on them and walked away. Back at the embassy, Minji was waiting. She did not say she had told him so. She did not need to. Her expression said everything. She had brought detailed information about Earth's military readiness. The defense fleet was prepared and waiting for orders. More than that, there were ships the council did not know about. Ships that had been built in secret over the past 15 years, hidden in asteroid fields and behind distant moons. Ships that were designed for one purpose only. Yoonji added her analysis. Humanity had been studying council species for years. She had detailed files on their biology, their technology, their military tactics. The Vrex relied on swarm coordination. The Kalthorans depended on heavy armor. Every species had weaknesses. Humanity had found all of them. Taewon reported that his spy network was ready to act. He had contacts among the smaller, oppressed species, groups that hated the council but were too weak to fight back alone. If humanity acted, they would have allies. Not many, but enough. Do-hyun listened to all of this. He thought about the 6 million dead. He thought about the council's laughter. He thought about 15 years of smiling while they insulted him. 15 years of playing weak while they grew comfortable in their power. Yoonji said something that stayed with him. She noted that humans evolved as persistence hunters. On Earth, humans were not the fastest or strongest predators. But they never gave up. They tracked their prey for days, following footprints and broken branches. They wore the animal down until it could not run anymore. Then they struck. The council had mistaken patience for weakness. They thought humans were harmless because they smiled and negotiated. They did not understand that patience was a hunting strategy. Humans had been tracking them all along. Do-hyun made his decision. He opened a secure channel to Earth Command. The encryption was so heavy that even Taewon's best equipment would need years to break it. He sent 5 words, "The mask has served its purpose." Then he sent a longer message. Instructions for what would happen next. Earth would begin immediate preparations. The colonies would fortify their defenses. The hidden fleet would move into position. and Do-hyun would deliver one final speech to the council. But this time he would not be asking for permission. He would not be pleading for justice. He would be giving them a warning. 2 days later, Do-hyun requested another emergency session. The council granted it, probably expecting another useless presentation. The delegates filed into the chamber with the same bored expressions. The Vreks whispered among themselves. The Kalthorans barely paid attention. Do-hyun walked to the center of the chamber. He carried no notes, no data pads, no evidence. He simply stood there and looked at each delegate in turn. When he spoke, his voice was different. No diplomatic softness, no careful phrasing, just cold, hard truth. He listed every insult humanity had endured, every dismissal, every act of sabotage. He named the species responsible for Haven Station's destruction. He detailed how the council had known about the attack and done nothing to stop it. Then he delivered Earth's response. Humanity was withdrawing from the council. Effective immediately, all human colonies were declaring independence from council law. All treaties were void. All agreements were canceled. Any species that entered human space without permission would be considered hostile. Any attack on human worlds would be answered with overwhelming force. Humanity would no longer ask for justice. They would deliver it themselves. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted and clicked and roared. The Vreks buzzed angrily. The Kalthorans rose from their seats, their scales rattling. Velthara tried to restore order. Her crystal body flashed bright colors, a sign of stress. She demanded that Do-hyun reconsider. Withdrawal from the council was forbidden. Species who left were considered criminals. The council would have no choice but to respond with force. Do-hyun looked at her directly. He said one sentence in response, "We look forward to it." Then he turned and walked out. Behind him, the council descended into chaos. Some delegates called for immediate military action. Others urged caution. A few smaller species stayed silent, their eyes following Do-hyun as he left. Minji, Yoonji, and Taewon were waiting at the embassy entrance. They had already packed everything important. The human staff had evacuated hours ago. Only the 4 of them remained. A ship was waiting to take them back to human space. As they boarded, Do-hyun took one last look at the council station. It still looked beautiful in the starlight, but he felt nothing but contempt for it now. For 15 years he had believed in the dream of peaceful coexistence. He had worn the mask of diplomacy with pride. He had thought that if humanity proved themselves worthy, the council would accept them. He had been a fool. The council did not want equals. They wanted servants. They wanted humans to know their place and stay there. Well, humanity had learned their place, and it was not kneeling at the council's feet. The ship jumped to faster than light speed. Behind them, the council prepared for war. They gathered their fleets and made their plans. They expected easy victory against the primitive humans. They were about to learn what happens when you mistake courtesy for weakness, when you confuse a smile for surrender, when you push a patient predator too far. The mask was gone. Now they would see the face underneath. The council fleet was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Over 3,000 warships gathered at the staging area near Chiral Prime. They came from 37 different species, each one eager to prove their loyalty to the council. Each one expecting easy victory. The Vreks brought their swarm ships, hundreds of small, fast vessels that moved in perfect coordination, like a school of fish. The Kalthorans contributed their dreadnoughts, massive ships covered in thick armor plating. Other species added cruisers, destroyers, and carriers. The combined fleet stretched across space like a metal ocean. The Council's military advisors had done their calculations. Humanity had perhaps 200 warships spread across their colonies. Even if humans had built more in secret, they could not possibly match the Council's numbers. The mathematics were simple. This would be a quick war. The fleet commander was a Kalthoran general named Kreth. He had fought in 17 wars and never lost a battle. He looked at the assembled fleet and felt pride. This would be his easiest victory. He gave the order to advance. 3,000 ships activated their jump drives and disappeared into faster-than-light space. Their destination was the Chiral threshold, the boundary between Council space and human territory. From there, they would push into human space and force their surrender. What Kreth did not know was that human ships had been waiting at the threshold for 3 days. What he did not know was that those ships numbered not 200 but 1,200. What he did not know was that every single human vessel had been designed with one specific purpose: to kill ships exactly like his. Captain Minji Kang stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable. Around her, holographic displays showed the positions of the entire human defense fleet. Every ship was in place. Every weapon was armed. Every crew member knew their role. Minji had waited 15 years for this moment. 15 years of watching the Council treat humanity like children. 15 years of preparing for the inevitable. Now the waiting was over. Her sensor officer reported contact. The Council fleet was dropping out of jump space. 3,000 ships appearing in waves. It was an impressive sight. It was also exactly what Minji had expected. Kreth saw the human fleet on his displays and laughed. 1,200 ships against 3,000. The humans were brave, he would give them that. Stupid but brave. He ordered his fleet to advance in standard formation. Then the humans did something unexpected. Instead of forming a defensive line, they scattered. Ships broke into small groups and accelerated in different directions. Within seconds, the organized human formation had dissolved into apparent chaos. Kreth was confused but not worried. Panicked enemies often broke formation. He ordered his fleet to pursue and destroy them. The Council ships spread out to chase the fleeing humans. That was when the trap closed. The human ships were not fleeing. They were moving into attack positions. What looked like chaos was actually perfect coordination. Every human captain knew exactly where they were supposed to be. They had practiced this maneuver 1,000 times in simulations. The first wave of human attacks targeted the Vrex swarm ships. Human vessels broadcast a specific frequency that disrupted Vrex neural communication. Suddenly, the swarm ships could not coordinate with each other. They flew blind and confused, bumping into each other, firing at their own allies. The second wave targeted the Kalthoran dreadnoughts. These ships were protected by heavy armor that could withstand most weapons. But human engineers had spent years studying that armor. They had found its weakness. The humans launched kinetic weapons at nearly the speed of light. Small metal projectiles that hit with incredible force. The Kalthoran armor cracked like eggshells. The third wave attacked communication relays. Every Council ship suddenly lost contact with the rest of the fleet. Commanders could not give orders. Ships could not coordinate their movements. The massive fleet became a collection of isolated vessels fighting alone. Kreth watched in horror as his perfect fleet fell apart. He tried to rally his ships, but his communications were jammed. He tried to form a defensive position, but human ships were everywhere, striking from unexpected angles. The humans fought in a way the Council had never seen. They used no honor codes. They followed no traditional rules of warfare. They targeted life support systems. They used debris as weapons. They deliberately spread panic by destroying command ships first. Every tactic was designed to maximize damage and minimize risk. Every move had been planned years in advance. The humans fought like they were not warriors but exterminators, efficiently destroying targets with cold precision. Species after species discovered that humanity knew their secrets. The crystalline vessels found that humans had developed weapons that shattered their structure. The methane breathers discovered that humans could ignite their atmosphere. The cybernetic species learned that humans had developed viruses specifically for their systems. 15 years of quiet observation. 15 years of careful study. 15 years of cataloging weaknesses while pretending to be harmless. All of that patience paid off in 6 hours of brutal combat. Minji directed the battle from her flagship with calm efficiency. She felt no joy in the destruction, no excitement in the victory. This was simply a job that needed doing. The Council had pushed humanity too far. Now they were learning the consequences. Around her, officers called out reports. Vrex swarm neutralized. Kalthoran dreadnoughts disabled. Enemy communications still jammed. Human casualties minimal. The battle was proceeding exactly as planned. Kreth finally managed to restore communications with part of his fleet. What he saw broke his spirit. Over half his ships were destroyed or disabled. The survivors were scattered and disorganized. The humans had barely taken any losses. He had never imagined defeat was possible. The Council fleet had always been invincible. They had crushed every rebellion. They had won every war. How could primitive humans do this? The answer was simple. The Council had grown comfortable. They expected their enemies to fight with honor and follow the rules. They expected traditional tactics and predictable strategies. They had fought the same way for thousands of years. Humans had no such traditions. They learned from every conflict in their violent history. They adapted. They innovated. They did whatever was necessary to win. Kreth gave the order to retreat. The surviving council ships activated their jump drives and fled. Many did not make it. Human ships pursued them right up until they disappeared into faster-than-light space. When the last council ship was gone, Minji ordered her fleet to stand down. She looked at the debris field that stretched across space. Thousands of destroyed ships, millions of dead aliens. The greatest military fleet in galactic history, shattered in 6 hours. She felt no satisfaction, only weariness. War was ugly even when it was necessary. Her communications officer asked if they should pursue the retreating council ships into their territory. Minji shook her head. That would be conquest. This was self-defense. There was a difference. Instead, she composed a message. It would be broadcast to every council world. Every species would hear it. The message was simple and direct. This was self-defense. Humanity did not want war. But if the council attacked again, the response would not be at the threshold. It would be at the council homeworlds. Humanity had shown restraint today. Do not make them demonstrate what offense looks like. The message was sent. Then Minji ordered her fleet to return to human space. They left the debris field behind as a warning. A monument to the council's arrogance. A reminder of what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. On Earth, Do-hyun received the battle report. He had not wanted war. He had spent 15 years trying to avoid this exact outcome. But the council had given him no choice. He thought about the 6 million dead at Haven Station. He thought about all the insults and humiliations. He thought about the council delegates laughing at his evidence. The council had believed that humanity's politeness was weakness. They had thought that smiling meant surrendering. They had pushed and pushed, expecting humans to break. Instead, humanity had bent. They had absorbed every insult. They had endured every provocation. They had smiled and nodded and prepared, and when the council finally pushed too far, humanity did not break. They exploded. The mask was gone. The galaxy had seen what lay underneath. Now came the hard part. What would humanity do with their victory? Would they become the very thing they had fought against? Or would they prove that there was another way? Do-hyun did not have those answers yet, but he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy in hours. The council fleet defeated. Humanity victorious. Species that had never questioned the council's power suddenly had many questions. On Kiral Prime, the council chamber was in chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. The Vrex blamed the Calthorans for poor coordination. The Calthorans blamed the Vrex for weak swarm tactics. Other species blamed both of them. Velthara tried to restore order, but her authority was crumbling. For 300 years, she had maintained peace through the threat of overwhelming force. Now that force had been proven hollow. The smaller species were no longer afraid. The larger species were no longer confident. Some delegates demanded immediate retaliation. They wanted to gather an even larger fleet and crush humanity completely. Others argued for negotiation. A few species quietly began withdrawing their support from the council entirely. Worse, the species that the council had suppressed for centuries saw their opportunity. Rebellion broke out on a dozen worlds. Resistance movements that had been hiding in shadow suddenly stepped into the light. They had weapons now, weapons provided by Agent Taewon's spy network. The council's grip on the galaxy was weakening. Their military was shattered. Their authority was questioned. Their unity was breaking. On Earth, Do-hyun watched the council's collapse with mixed feelings. Part of him felt satisfaction. They had dismissed humanity for so long. They had laughed at human evidence of murder. They had deserved this humiliation, but another part of him felt concern. The galaxy was descending into chaos. Without the council's structure, even a flawed one, there would be war everywhere. Species would fight species. The strong would prey on the weak. It would be centuries of bloodshed. Captain Minji had different concerns. She was fortifying human space with defensive stations, building more ships, training more soldiers. She trusted the victory at the threshold, but she did not trust the peace that followed. The council might rally. They might come back stronger. Dr. Yoonji continued her research. She was developing countermeasures for every possible threat. Biological weapons that could target specific species. Electronic warfare systems. Gravity manipulation technology. If the Council attacked again, humanity would be even more prepared. Agent Taewon was expanding his network. He was making contact with more resistance groups, providing them with intelligence, sometimes weapons, sometimes just encouragement. The galaxy was changing and Taewon was helping to shape that change. Then a message arrived. It was encrypted with a code that only the highest-level council officials knew. Do-hyun almost deleted it, assuming it was a trap. But something made him decrypt it instead. The message was from Velthara. She wanted to meet. Not on Chiral Prime, but on neutral ground, an abandoned trading station at the edge of council space. She would come alone. She asked Do-hyun to do the same, though she suggested he bring Agent Taewon for security. Minji was against the meeting. She said it was obviously a trap. The council wanted revenge, and they would take it by killing Earth's ambassador. Do-hyun should refuse. Taewon was more uncertain. His intelligence suggested the message was genuine. Velthara was losing control of the council. She might be seeking a way out. But genuine did not mean safe. Many genuine messages had led to assassinations. Yoonji said nothing. She simply looked at Do-hyun with her quiet, thoughtful expression. He knew what she was thinking. This was his decision to make. Whatever he chose would shape humanity's future. Do-hyun thought about it for 2 days. He could refuse and stay safe, but then he would never know what Velthara wanted. He could send someone else, but the message had specifically requested him. He could go with a military escort, but that would prove he did not trust her. In the end, he decided to go. He took only Taewon, as Velthara had suggested. If it was a trap, at least only 2 humans would die instead of many. If it was genuine, it might be humanity's chance to shape what came next. The abandoned trading station floated in dark space, far from any inhabited system. It had been a bustling commercial hub once. Now it was empty and cold. Do-hyun's ship docked carefully, sensors scanning for hidden threats. Velthara was waiting in what had been the main trading floor. Her crystalline body reflected the dim emergency lights in rainbow patterns. She stood alone as promised, no guards, no weapons visible. Taewon stayed near the entrance, his hand near his weapon. Do-hyun walked forward to meet the council chairwoman. Velthara spoke first. Her voice sounded tired, like wind chimes in a dying breeze. She thanked Do-hyun for coming. She knew he was taking a risk. She appreciated his courage. Do-hyun said nothing. He waited for her to explain why they were there. Velthara told him something unexpected. She had wanted humanity to fight back. The council had been stagnant for thousands of years. The same powerful species ruled everything. The same patterns repeated endlessly. Any species that showed promise was crushed before they could challenge the established order. She had recognized humanity's potential the moment they applied for council membership. They advanced too quickly. They adapted too well. They would either revolutionize the galaxy or be destroyed by it. She had hoped for revolution, so she had engineered their admission to the council. She had allowed the insults and dismissals. She had known about the Haven Station attack and done nothing to stop it. All of it was calculated to push humanity past their breaking point. Do-hyun felt anger building inside him. 6 million people had died. 15 years of humiliation. All of it was her manipulation. Velthara did not deny it. She said she understood his anger. But she asked him to consider the alternative. If humanity had been accepted peacefully, what would have happened? The council would have slowly strangled them. Treaties that limited their growth. Regulations that restricted their technology. Subtle sabotage that kept them weak. Peaceful admission would have been a slow death. By forcing humanity to fight, she had given them a chance at survival. At victory, at changing the galaxy for the better. Do-hyun did not know whether to believe her. It could all be lies. A clever explanation for failure. Or it could be the truth. Perhaps Velthara really had been working for change all along. Either way, it did not matter now. The past was done. What mattered was the future. Velthara asked him a simple question. What did humanity want? Did they want to conquer the galaxy? To retreat into isolation? Or to build something better? Do-hyun was silent for a long moment. That was the question, was it not? Humanity had won the battle. They had proven their strength. Now they had to decide what kind of civilization they wanted to be. He told Velthara that he did not have an answer yet. This was too important for one person to decide. Earth's leaders would need to debate it. The colonies would need to vote. Humanity would choose together. Velthara accepted this. She said that if humanity chose to build something new, she would help them. She still had influence among some council species. The smaller ones. The oppressed ones. Together they might be able to create an alternative to the old council. But if humanity chose conquest or isolation, she would not stand in their way. They had earned the right to choose their own path. Do-hyun left the meeting with much to think about. Taewon said little on the flight back to Earth. He had recorded the entire conversation, of course. Earth's leaders would analyze every word, but Do-hyun already knew what he would recommend. Humanity had not fought for the right to become tyrants. They had fought for the right to choose their own destiny. And he believed that destiny involved more than just survival. Humanity had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain not through individual strength, but through cooperation. Through building communities? Through working together toward common goals. Perhaps they could do the same thing on a galactic scale. Perhaps they could prove that different species could coexist without hierarchy, without domination, without someone always being on top. It would be difficult. It would require patience. It would mean working with some of the same species that had tried to destroy them. But difficult was not the same as impossible. And humanity had always been good at doing impossible things. The emergency session of the Unified Earth Council lasted 3 days. Representatives from Earth and all 47 colony worlds gathered to decide humanity's future. The debate was fierce and emotional. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone believed their path was the right one. Captain Minji presented the case for military strength. Humanity had won one battle, but the war was not over. The Council would rebuild. Other species might see humanity's victory as a threat. The galaxy was a dangerous place. Humanity needed to be strong enough to defend itself. Perhaps strong enough to never be challenged again. Some delegates agreed with her. They argued for isolationism. Humanity should withdraw completely from galactic affairs. Build impenetrable defenses around human space. Let the rest of the galaxy destroy itself while humanity stayed safe behind walls. Others argued for expansion. Humanity had proven military superiority. They should use that advantage to create their own empire. Not out of cruelty, but to bring order to chaos. To protect the weak from the strong. To build something better than the Council, even if it meant doing so by force. Dr. Yoonji spoke against both positions. She reminded the Council that humanity had not fought for the right to become conquerors. They had fought for survival and freedom. Isolation would eventually lead to stagnation. Conquest would turn them into the very thing they had defeated. There had to be another way. Agent Taewon added his perspective. His spy network had made contact with dozens of oppressed species. They were looking to humanity for leadership. If humanity withdrew or became tyrants, those species would be crushed by the old council powers. But if humanity helped them, they could build something new together. Do-hyun listened to all the arguments. He understood each position. Fear was reasonable after what they had endured. Anger was justified. The desire for security made sense. But he also understood something else. Humanity's greatest strength had never been military power. It was their ability to cooperate, to build communities, to find common ground with people who seemed completely different. When it was his turn to speak, Do-hyun stood before the assembled delegates. He talked about Earth's history, thousands of years of warfare between nations, conflicts over resources, territory, ideology. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself many times, but they had also learned. Slowly, painfully, they had learned to cooperate. To see former enemies as potential partners, to build systems where disputes were resolved through discussion rather than destruction. The Galactic Council had failed humanity. That was true, but the dream behind it was not wrong. The idea that different civilizations could coexist peacefully was worth pursuing. The Council had simply been built on the wrong foundation, on hierarchy and domination rather than equality and mutual respect. Do-hyun proposed a different path. Work with Velthara and the other species who wanted change. Build a new organization to replace the Council. One based on voluntary membership. One where all species had equal voice regardless of their military power. one where disputes were resolved through arbitration, not force. It would be difficult. Some species would never accept such a system. The Vrex and Caltherans would likely refuse and form their own rival bloc. The galaxy might divide into competing factions. There would be tensions and conflicts. But it would also be an opportunity, a chance to prove that cooperation was possible even between truly different civilizations. A chance to build something better than what came before. The debate continued for hours after Do-Hyun's speech. Colony representatives argued about details. Earth delegates questioned the risks. Military advisors warned about vulnerabilities. Finally, the vote was called. It was close. Some delegates voted for isolation. Some voted for military expansion. But the majority, by a slim margin, voted to pursue Do-Hyun's proposal. Humanity would try to build a new galactic order based on cooperation and equality. The work began immediately. Do-Hyun and Velthara drafted a new charter. They called it the Coalition of Free Worlds. Any species could join. Any species could leave. Decisions required consensus, not domination. Military force was forbidden except in self-defense. Economic cooperation was encouraged, but every world maintained sovereignty. Representatives from smaller species flocked to join. They had suffered under the old council. They welcomed the chance for something better. Within months, over 100 species had signed the charter. But not everyone joined. The Vrex Dominion and Calthoran Empire rejected the coalition. They formed their own alliance, the Empire Bloc, along with several dozen other powerful species who preferred the old hierarchical system. The galaxy divided into three factions: the Coalition, the Empire Bloc, and the neutral worlds caught between them. Captain Minji was appointed commander of the Coalition Defense Force. It was a position she accepted with reluctance. She trusted the treaties, but she prepared for their inevitable violation. She built defensive stations along coalition borders. She trained military personnel from dozens of different species to work together. She hoped for peace, but prepared for war. Dr. Yoonji established the Coalition Science Institute. Researchers from hundreds of species came together to share knowledge freely. Breakthroughs that might have taken centuries under the old system happened in years. Medical advances, agricultural innovations, new technologies that benefited everyone. Agent Taewon transitioned from spy to diplomat. He traveled to neutral worlds, encouraging them to join the coalition. He resolved disputes before they escalated into violence. He used information to build bridges instead of destroy enemies. The peace was fragile. The Empire Bloc conducted military exercises at coalition borders. Pirates exploited the gaps between territories. Some coalition members grew frustrated with democratic decision-making and longed for the efficiency of authoritarian rule. But the coalition survived. Trade flourished between member worlds. Cultural exchanges became common. Young beings from different species studied together, learning to see beyond their own perspectives. It was messy and complicated and often frustrating, exactly like humanity's own journey from warring tribes to unified civilization. 5 years after the Battle of the Chiral Threshold, Ambassador Do-Hyun stood before the Coalition Assembly. He represented not just Earth but the entire human federation of 47 colony worlds. Around him sat representatives from over 100 species. Beings who had once been enemies now debated policy together. The session that day was typical: arguments about trade regulations, debates about border disputes, a committee report on scientific collaboration. Nothing dramatic, nothing historic. Just the everyday work of beings from different worlds trying to coexist peacefully. Later, in the embassy, Captain Minji asked Do-Hyun a question. Did he regret the choice they had made? Isolation would have been simpler, safer. Humanity could have built paradise behind impenetrable walls and ignored the galaxy's problems. Do-Hyun considered this. He thought about the 6 million lives lost at Haven Station, the sacrifices made during the battle, the years of humiliation endured in the old council, the ongoing tensions with the Empire Bloc. Then he looked out at the assembly chamber. 100 different species arguing, compromising, and occasionally even agreeing. It was not perfect. It was not even particularly efficient. But it was genuine. These beings were learning to trust each other, learning to work together despite their differences. Do-Yun told Minji about the mask humanity had worn for 15 years. That courteous, diplomatic mask that the Council had mistaken for weakness. When humanity finally let that mask fall, the galaxy saw something that terrified them. Not because humans were monsters, but because they were effective, efficient, dangerous. Humanity could have used that fear to conquer the galaxy. They could have built an empire on intimidation and force. Many species expected them to do exactly that. Instead, humanity chose something harder. They chose to teach the galaxy that the mask was never cowardice. It was civilization. The ability to choose patience over violence. The wisdom to prefer cooperation over domination. The strength to build rather than destroy. That lesson was still being learned. Some species understood it. Others rejected it. The Empire bloc might never accept it. War might come again one day. But for now, there was peace. Imperfect, fragile, constantly threatened. But real. And every day that peace continued was a victory. Not the kind of victory celebrated with parades and monuments, but the quiet, persistent victory of choosing the difficult path over the easy one. Minji seemed satisfied with this answer. She returned to her military preparations. Yunji went back to her research. Taewon departed for another diplomatic mission, each of them doing their part to maintain the peace they had fought so hard to win. Do-Hyun stayed in the observation deck, watching the stars. He thought about how far humanity had come, from a single planet to dozens of colony worlds, from ignorance of alien life to cooperation with hundreds of species, from being dismissed as primitive to shaping the future of the galaxy. The journey had been painful. The cost had been high, but they had proven something important, not just to the galaxy but to themselves. Humanity could be patient when patience was needed, fierce when fierceness was required, but most importantly, they could choose which face to show. The mask had served its purpose, yes, but the face underneath was not monstrous.